Hi, I want to speak to you about how it can be very difficult for somebody with neurodivergence or history of trauma to access their emotions. And if you have experience of these, either of these two things, or perhaps both, then you probably have had difficulties with accessing your emotions, and this is very common for such a case. And usually, when you hear someone talk about this issue, or perhaps you're in therapy and your therapist would tell you it's explained as a kind of suppression that your nervous system does because the feelings that it feels are too intense for it to process. And usually the intensity of the feelings is very much validly too intense, since many of these traumas happen in early childhood, when the nervous system is indeed not calibrated enough for certain experiences. And then this suppression just sort of carries on indefinitely until something either triggers it to unfold unexpectedly and disruptively, or until it is tapped into during the course of some sort of therapy. However, I do know another thing that can keep your emotions away from you, specifically if you are neurodiverse or a couple of very specific things had gone wrong in your childhood. And I would like to tell you about that now. So, one of the keys to your emotions, if they are blocked out from you and you don't really know what you're feeling, and also perhaps seem to be stuck in some areas of your life, and this key is shame. So how this works is, when a person is very, very, very small, they perceive as part of their development the whole world to be directly linked to themselves. Essentially, this is a form of a kind of narcissistic perspective that all children have in the very first years of their lives. So here's an example. A child that is 1 or 2 years old will necessarily believe that something bad happening around it is its own fault. That is just how the human psyche is set up at that stage in its development. So if adults are arguing, the child may actually feel itself a part of this issue. It may feel an impulse to protect one of its parents or otherwise resolve the situation, and it will inevitably internalize this situation, which will shape how it reacts to the world later on in life. Another example would be if a child wants something and is denied it, then it would perceive being denied this thing as part of its self-image. It will think in its little head, perhaps even before it has the words to do so, since I am being denied this want of mine, I must be unworthy of it. And that indeed can stay with someone for a lifetime also. Of course, generally speaking, one might not internalize every such occasion in such a formative way. There are quite a few factors that also play into it, including whether the child is securely attached to its caregiver, the child's natural temperament, or the child's emotional state on a particular day. Coming back to the original topic, something that can happen more often than it really should is that when a very small child's feelings are hurt, or perhaps it is physically hurt in some way, and the issue is not resolved, the child may begin to believe that if it is hurting as a result of some outward forces, then it is its own fault. And of course, in some cases, the adults surrounding the child may even tell it that it is at fault for whatever is distressing it. And that is very unfortunate, but it does not have to be the case for this situation to occur anyway. It would be enough that the child is not soothed in its distress. The child then develops a sensation that it is faulty when it is hurting. And this is one of the ways that shame first settles into the body. And when this happens so early on, it can be one of the reasons that this person who continues to grow and develop will, going forward, not be able to access its own feelings of hurt and probably other feelings too. And now I got distracted, so I don't remember where I left off. Anyway, when this happens so early on in a small person's life, they can be numbed out from many of their feelings going forward, even all the way into adulthood. And the key there that would open up those stored feelings is moving through the shame that they have put on to the box where they store those feelings as if it were a padlock. And shame is very difficult to work with. We always tend to avoid it. It eats away at our feeling of self-worth and is indeed very difficult to bear. So it is hard to presume that this kind of work would be necessary for the purpose of accessing feelings that have been stored away for decades, and there may be nearly no other way of getting at them. So this is an interesting angle to explore. If you have trauma, self-esteem issues, or even alexythemia connected to neurodivergence, and working through shame is difficult. But I want you to remember that if you are hurting, it is definitely not your fault. Thank you for listening.